You already know why you clicked. You already know. You saw that clip, you sent it to 3 different group chats, you watched it back to back to back, and now you're here because you need somebody to actually sit down and tell you the full truth about what is happening inside the Indiana Fever organization. Because that bench moment, that viral video from Portland, that is just the surface. That is just the visible part of something that goes much, much deeper. And on this channel, we don't stop at the surface. I'm Dre Fiver. This is Street Hoops. And today we are not just talking about a heated sideline exchange. We are talking about the entire future of Caitlin Clark in Indianapolis. Her contract, her boyfriend's career moves, the alleged front office tension that nobody in the mainstream is willing to name directly, and a collection of details that when you line them all up side by side, paint a picture that every Indiana Fever fan needs to see right now. Buckle up. Church is in session. Let me start with the game itself, because context matters, and the Portland story is the foundation for everything else we're about to build on. Indiana Fever versus Portland Fire, Saturday, May 30th, 2026. The Fever walked into the Moda Center as a 12-point favorite against an expansion franchise in the very first season of its existence. Not just a modest favorite, a 12-point favorite, and they walked out of that building on the wrong end of a 100-84 blowout. 16 points, Portland led by as many as 26 at the peak of their run. Megan Gustafson dropped a game-high 22 points. 2 Portland players, Carla Light and Emily Engsler, posted double-doubles in the same game against this Indiana defense. The Fever fell to 4-4 on the season. That is 500 ball through 8 games for a team that was supposed to be competing for a championship. And before we even get to the bench argument, before we even get to Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White going at it in front of the whole world, let's talk about the first quarter, because the first quarter is where the autopsy on this game actually starts. Indiana came out hot. Clark was locked in. She and Aliyah Boston helped the Fever build an 8-4 lead inside the first 3.5 minutes. The pick and roll was working. Boston was converting off Clark's reads. The offense looked exactly like what it is supposed to look like when this team is functioning. And then Stephanie White called for substitutions. With 6:30 left in the first quarter, she pulled Clark, Boston, and Lexi Hall out of the game simultaneously. All 3 of her most important players, while Indiana was winning and building rhythm against an expansion team. Portland went on a 13-2 run almost immediately. By the time the first quarter ended, the Fever had turned an 8-4 advantage into a 29-15 deficit, a 25-7 Portland swing in one quarter, and the game was essentially over before it ever really began. After the final buzzer, Stephanie White was asked about those substitutions. Her explanation was that Aliyah Boston is still on a minutes restriction, that pulling Clark at that stage had been the standard rotation pattern all season, and that the only reason she deviated from it in the Golden State game was because she did not want Raven Johnson in that environment without another ball handler on the floor. Now, Dre is going to say something that might be uncomfortable for some people. That explanation is not good enough. Not even close. When your team is up and your best player is creating advantages with the pick and roll, you do not pull her on a script. You ride the momentum. You adjust on the fly. That is what elite coaches do. That is what separates good coaches from great ones. The ability to read the game as it is happening and deviate from the plan when the plan says stop what's working. White didn't do that. She followed the clipboard. Portland exploited it, and 25,000 people in that building and however many millions watching at home watched the Fever's lead evaporate because of a scripted rotation that nobody adjusted in real time. Then came the bench moment. Second quarter, timeout, and the cameras caught everything. White got visibly animated, pointing directly at Clark, slapping her own knee, delivering what was clearly a pointed defensive lecture with real heat behind it. Clark sat there calm as a lake for a beat. Water bottle, straight face, not engaging. Then she hit her limit, threw both hands up, and fired back. And within seconds, White gestured for rookie Raven Johnson to come over and take the active bench seat, moving Clark out of the immediate bench area in real time. Clark walked away still seething, shaking her head, and the basketball internet absolutely erupted. 16,000 views in the first wave alone, and it has been climbing ever since. The argument was about defense, specifically about Clark's positioning. The allegation from White being that Clark was not going straight up on her matchup, was reaching instead of moving her feet, was creating foul problems through her own defensive technique. And here is where Dre is going to give you both sides, honestly, because fairness demands it. Clark's defensive limitations are documented. This is not a secret. She picked up 5 fouls in just 22 minutes against Portland. 5 fouls. That kind of foul trouble does not happen by accident. Opposing coaches in this league specifically target Clark defensively in isolation sets because they know she is the Fever's only real ball handler, and if they can get her into foul trouble early, they fundamentally change what Indiana can run offensively. Every scout in the WNBA has that in their game plan. So yes, Clark's individual defense is something that legitimately needs improvement, and Stephanie White has every right as a head coach to demand better on that end. But here is the counter. The structural defensive problems for Indiana that night were not about one player reaching on one isolation. Portland was attacking every single matchup on the floor. They exposed the entire rotational system. Carla Lady finished with 18 points and 12 assists against this defense. Emily Engstler posted a double-double. Portland went on a run that peaked at 26 points. That is not Caitlin Clark's defense losing this game. That is a team-wide systemic breakdown. And yet the public confrontation on that bench was directed at one player, not at the team collectively, not at the defense as a unit, at Clark specifically. And that optic, fair or not, intentional or not, is going to follow this coaching staff for a while. After the game, Clark went to the podium and said something that you need to understand the significance of. She said publicly, on the record, in a post-game press conference, that she felt the rotations were a little bit slow in the third quarter and that she hopes they are quicker going forward. Read that sentence carefully. Caitlin Clark, the franchise player, the most marketable athlete in the history of women's basketball, just publicly critiqued her head coach's substitution timing at the podium. After a 16-point loss, she did not scream. She did not throw White under the bus in tabloid language. She was measured and professional. But she was absolutely, unmistakably on record saying the rotation decisions cost them. And when White was asked directly about Clark's comments, she responded that she does not know if foul trouble has a lot to do with rotations and that the issue is really anticipation. She deflected. She did not own it. And that response, that gap between what Clark said publicly and what White was willing to acknowledge, is a crack in the foundation that you cannot just patch over with a hug and a press conference smile. Now let's move to the story that goes even deeper, because what happened in Portland is just the latest chapter. The real story that has the basketball world buzzing is not about one bad game or one bench argument. It is about Caitlin Clark's future in Indianapolis and the mounting collection of evidence that suggests that future is significantly less certain than anyone in the Fever organization wants to admit publicly. Here is the contract situation, exactly as it stands, no spin. When the new WNBA collective bargaining agreement was finalized, it included a provision called EPIC, Exceptional Performance on Initial Contract. This rule allows players on rookie-scale deals who have won MVP or earned all wnba honors within their first 3 seasons to renegotiate their fourth-year salary and add a multi-year extension. Clark qualifies. She has been named an All-Star in each of her first 2 seasons. She is currently making $528,000 in 2026 under her revised rookie deal, up from the $78,000 she made in 2025. The Fever exercised her 4th-year option in April, meaning she is under contract through the 2027 season at $597,000. Under EPIC, after this season ends, both parties can negotiate a supermax extension that could lock Clark in through 2030 and pay her at the maximum salary level, which, under the new CBA, sits at $1.4 million annually. Her teammate Aliyah Boston already used the EPIC provision to sign a record $6.3 million extension. The framework is in place, the numbers are available, the infrastructure exists to pay Clark and keep her in Indianapolis for the foreseeable future. And yet, and this is the part that should make every Fever fan extremely uncomfortable, there has been complete public silence on any progress toward getting that deal done. The Fever have not announced anything. Clark's camp has not announced anything. Nobody has called a press conference to say the two sides are close, that talks are ongoing, that everybody wants the same thing. Total silence. And in the world of professional sports contracts, when your franchise player is heading into an EPIC-eligible offseason and nobody is saying anything, that silence is not reassuring. That silence is a story. Now let's talk about Connor McCaffrey, because this is where things get genuinely interesting. McCaffrey is Caitlin Clark's boyfriend, son of longtime college coach Fran McCaffrey, former Iowa Hawkeye who holds the second-best assist-to-turnover ratio in NCAA history, a genuinely sharp basketball mind who has been building his coaching career systematically since his playing career ended. He went from Indiana Pacers development coordinator in 2023-24 to assistant coach at Butler under Thad Matta for 2 seasons in 2024 and 2025. Both of those positions were in Indianapolis. He specifically arranged his professional life around being in the same city as Clark. And in April of 2026, right before the WNBA season began, Connor McCaffrey announced his departure from Butler. He posted to Instagram, called it the end of an era, thanked Coach Matta for the opportunity, said he worked with great people, and wrote that he is excited for what's next. He did not announce what's next. He left Indianapolis, or at minimum left his Indianapolis-based job, without publicly naming a landing spot. Clark responded to the post with 2 words: fun times. Not excited for you. Not can't wait to see what's next. Fun times. 2 words. That response, from someone who publicly gushed about McCaffrey joining Butler 2 years ago, posting, "Yay, so happy for you" on her Instagram story the day that news broke, lands very differently than it would in isolation. Now, before anyone clips this and tries to make it into something it is not, Dre is not saying McCaffrey leaving Butler is definitive proof that Clark is leaving Indiana. I want to be clear about what I am and am not saying. What I am saying is that the details deserve to be examined seriously. McCaffrey spent 2 years deliberately staying in Indianapolis to be close to Clark. He had no publicly announced next destination when he left. His younger brother Jack had literally just joined the Butler program, which was part of the family dynamic that made Butler attractive in the first place, and he chose this particular moment, spring 2026, right before Clark's most pivotal season and her first epic eligible offseason, to walk away from his Indianapolis job without a visible next step. That is a detail. That is a data point. It does not stand alone. It sits alongside the contract silence, alongside the bench confrontation, alongside the publicly critiqued rotations, alongside the 4-4 record that is already embarrassing for a championship expectation franchise. When you lay all of those details next to each other, the picture that starts to form is one that Indiana Fever fans need to take seriously. There are also whispers, and Dre is going to call them whispers because they have not been confirmed by named sources, and I refuse to report something with a stamp of certainty that it does not deserve. But there are whispers in certain basketball circles about tension between Clark's camp and the Indiana front office. Not between Clark and the coaching staff necessarily. Between Clark and the people at the top of the organizational structure, the president and general manager level, the nature of what allegedly damaged that relationship has not been specified publicly. But the pattern of behavior that is emerging, the contract silence, the McCaffrey departure, the increasingly public friction between Clark and her head coach, does not paint a portrait of a star player who is happily settling in for the long haul and counting down the days until she signs a Supermax extension. Dre's honest read is this: Caitlin Clark is under contract in Indiana through 2027. She is not going anywhere in the immediate term. If the Fever stay at 500 or below and continue to underperform against their own championship expectations, if the epic extension talks do not produce a deal before the deadline, and if the front office relationship does not get repaired, then when free agency becomes available, Clark is going to have every option in the world. She is the biggest star in women's basketball history. Every franchise in the league, and potentially expansion franchises not yet in existence, would restructure their entire organization to acquire her. The leverage she holds is absolute, and leverage only gets exercised when one side is not satisfied with the arrangement. Right now, the visible evidence does not suggest she is entirely satisfied. Now here is what Indiana needs to do, and they need to do it urgently. First, fix the rotation problem. Stop coaching from a script when the game is telling you to deviate. The first quarter substitution against Portland was indefensible. When your best player is generating advantages, and you pull her because the clock says so, you are not adjusting, you are managing. There is a difference between managing a rotation and coaching a basketball game. And right now, Stephanie White appears more interested in the former. Second, address the epic extension publicly and proactively. The franchise needs to communicate, through whatever channel makes sense, that they are working toward getting Clark's deal done. The silence is feeding speculation, and in the social media age, speculation does not stay small. Third, and this is the hardest one, repair whatever happened at the front office level that allegedly created tension with Clark's camp. Because player-coach friction happens in every sport at every level and usually gets resolved. Player-front office tension is different. It cuts deeper and lasts longer. And if Clark genuinely has a cold relationship with the people making organizational decisions above Stephanie White, that is not something you fix by putting Raven Johnson in her bench seat during a timeout. What happened Saturday in Portland was a bad night. 4-4 is a concerning record. The bench argument was a bad moment, but all of those things are recoverable if the organization responds correctly. The contract situation and the McCaffrey departure are the details that linger past one bad game. Those are the details that point toward a larger question about the 2028 off-seasons that nobody in Indianapolis is ready to answer publicly yet. And on this channel, we ask the questions that the mainstream is too comfortable to ask. So Dre is asking, Indiana Fever, what exactly is your plan to keep Caitlin Clark? Not through 2027. That is handled. Through 2030. Through the prime of her career. Through the era where women's basketball becomes what we all know it is going to become. What is the plan? Because the rest of this league is watching. Every general manager, every ownership group, every city that does not currently have a WNBA franchise is watching this situation and doing the math. And if Indiana doesn't get this right, there will be no shortage of people ready and willing to offer Caitlin Clark everything Indianapolis couldn't. This story is not over. Not even close. Street Hoops is going to be right here every step of the way. So if you are not locked in yet, now is the time. Smash that like button right now because it feeds the algorithm and it keeps this channel growing and delivering you the content the mainstream is too scared to put out. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know, do you think Clark is signing that epic extension and staying in Indiana? Or do you think the clock is running on this partnership? And if you are not subscribed to Street Hoops, what exactly are you doing? Hit that subscribe button, turn the notifications on, because when this story breaks wide open, you want to be in the room when it happens. I'm Dre Fiver. This is Street Hoops. We out.